بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing our lessons on the fiqh of food and drink, we spoke about last week the issue of cross-contamination, and this week inshallah we want to wrap up this series in some issues related to restaurants and eating in restaurants. So some fiqh related to restaurants, because there are some issues that arise and is connected to our topic. And bi'idhnillahi ta'ala we will finish this series with this topic, since alhamdulillah we covered for the most part all the major things that we wish to cover. So to begin with, the first thing that we need to discuss is what is the ruling on eating in public spaces like restaurants, because in the past the ulama they discussed this issue in the sense that restaurants didn't exist, but what existed was people eating in the streets or eating in the market. And so we know going to the marketplace, despite whatever bad is in there, it's permissible. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam and the Rusul before him alayhim salam, they used to go to the suq, they used to go to the aswaq, the markets. So from here the scholars, some of them discussed eating in the market, and they held the view that it is from the things that take away from man's muru'ah, and which means his manliness or his good qualities. It's very important. This is what they held in the past. For example, Ibn Arabi al-Maliki rahimahullah, in Ahkam al-Quran, he says, وَأَمَّا أَكْلُ الطَّعَامِ, as for eating food, he says, فَالضَّرُورَةُ الْخَلْقِ لَا عَارَ وَلَا دَرْكِ فِيهِ وَأَمَّا الْأَسْوَاقِ فَسَمِعْتُ مَشَايِخ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ يَقُولُونَ لَا يَدْخُلُ إِلَّا سُوقُ الْكُتُبِ وَالسِّلَاحِ, until the end of his quote. So he says, in terms of eating in the food in general, then of course the necessity is there for a person to do so, the creation. But in terms of going to the market and eating, then a person, i.e. a value or a person of good character, wouldn't enter into the markets except for the marketplaces of books and weaponry. Yani men were not known to eat in the suq until the end of his quote. And there's like a real need. وَإِلَّا, he says, لَأَنَّ ذَلِكَ إِسْقَاطٌ لِمَرُوءَةٍ. So in their view, it was considered something which will lower the status of a person. However, the hal today is that it's not the open market anymore. The restaurants are becoming closures, where you go inside and you sit. Or you have within the market, like a shopping mall, places where you sit. Right? So in there, the situation is a little bit different. So the past idea of something being challenging or ruining someone's muru'ah, someone's manliness, is not always there. We know the principle of muru'ah, manliness, good qualities and culture of a man changes from place to time and place to place. Then Imam al-Qurtubi rahimahullah comments after that, saying that in his time things are a little bit different, and he specifically mentions that it's got worse because he lives in the generation after. Then going to the restaurants, for the most part, the ulama, our scholars, they don't prohibit it. They don't prohibit it. It's no prohibition in that, provided that nothing haram is taking place in it. That's the original ruling. Because the earlier view that eating in the market or eating public was considered not good qualities or good culture doesn't apply now, because things have changed. And so with that being said, then we move to the next discussion, which is, what about going to these restaurants and there is things that are haram? And the most specific of those things is the issue that we find of ikhtilat, free mixing within the market, within the restaurants. Ikhtilat al-mata'im, it's a big issue in lands that we live in where it's almost impossible to escape. And this is going to extend also to free mixing in the market, like in a mall or a grocery store or something like this. So our ulama, generally, contemporary scholars, when they discuss the issue, they always advise that the markets and the restaurants should be segregated. And it's very common in the Muslim countries, that segregation, men's section, or the singles, they say, and the family. And so this concept is what the ulama advise. Shaykh Uthaymeen in his website, rahimahullah, he mentions after this question was raised to him, that it's not necessary that men and women mix together, even relatives who are not immediate relatives, i.e. they're further distant relatives. In these places, rather there should be a majlis khas, a specific place for the rijal, the men, ومجلس خاص لعوائل, for the families. And so the men on one side, women on the other side. He said this is better so there will be no fitna, no trial and tribulation. And so from here we see that that's the best way to deal with it. It should be segregated, especially if somebody is a Muslim who has a Muslim restaurant. You should make it provided segregation, especially for the families, because they don't want to be sitting in front of others. And those who wear, women who wear niqab, it's even more problematic. And this is one of the reasons the Shaykh said, how can they eat in front of others and they have to, for example, in Saudi, they have to wear the niqab, or they wear the niqab, it's a problem. But with that being said, what about places like here where we don't find that, except for very few restaurants or like this? So some of the ulama in the past, the fuqaha in the past, some of them, they said that it's permissible for men and women to sit together, i.e. families or mahram, provided that they're not sitting with a non-mahram people. I.e., for example, they gathered some place together and they're not sitting next to those who are non-mahram immediately, or this fitna is not assumed or safe from fitna. Some of the Malikiyyah, they mention this. But truth be told, even then, it's very hard to say that in today's time because fitna is everywhere. And to give you that example, Imam Qurtubi, when he cited what Ibn Arabi said earlier, he says, our mashayikh today, what they say, that is disliked to go to the markets in his time, it's the 7th century. فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ خَالٍ عَنْ نَظَرٍ إِلَى النِّسْوَةِ وَمُخَالِطِهِنَّ, because this in reality necessitates or is not free from looking at the women and mixing with them. So he held that as disliked because the market still does hajj. So some of our contemporary researchers, they said in the situation where someone has a choice, going to the markets or the restaurants where there's no free mixing is the best. But in the situation someone can't find, then they have to do their best. And it's connected to another issue we'll get to, which is the issue of alcohol. And that's what we know, that in situation we live here in the West, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. And it doesn't mean that fear Allah as much as you can, you just go any place. It means to try to find the best situation possible, because to necessitate here that restaurants are haram because of that is equivalent to saying that markets are haram or malls are haram because of this, or anything else you can imagine where there's a hajj, especially if there's a need. We're not talking places where there's no need. And so with that being said, then some of them said that, some researchers that looked at it as like other issues. If there's a need, you do it. Otherwise, best to avoid. And this is important because as Muslims we know, visiting these places continuously, especially when we live in here, you lose the concern and sensitivity to haram. So the bottom line then is someone is going to sit in these kind of places, they should try to sit away from those who are not mahram to them, especially if they're sitting with brothers sitting together or families sitting together. And if the situation where there's places where there's enclosures, this is the best. It's very important to look for those environments. And if there's restaurants that are better than others, then this is always better. Because the ulama, another issue that they come, and this is the third one we're going to get to. So the issue is restaurants, still the origin is permissible, but of course it can change place to place. Means that certain places may be worse than others. And also if someone could take the food out and eat at home or another safer place, this is always better. Because it gets away from fitna. But there comes now the second issue, or third issue connected to this. What about eating restaurants in which there is khamar being served, intoxicants, and the person who's going to eat in these restaurants is going to eat something halal. He's not going to eat that or drink from the alcohol intoxicants. So here the scholars, when they talk about this issue, they understand fully that when you live in the West, this is very common that you find restaurants that have alcohol served. Either it's available and it's not served in the moment, or it's hidden and later on comes, or it's there but not on your table. So from here we know there's a hadith. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he told us, whoever believes in Allah the last day, let them not sit at a table in which alcohol is being circulated. Hadith Muslim Imam Ahmed, Hadith Tirmidhi, it's Hadith Sahih, and this is the origin of the discussion. Hadith Jabir ibn Abdullah radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. Whoever believes in Allah on the last day, let them not sit on a ma'idah, a table, yudaru alayha khamar, when khamar is being circulated or is being drunk. And so from here, the question then comes, what does it mean to sit ala ma'idah? Yani, فَلَا يَجْلِسْ عَلَى مَائِدَةٍ, not sit on a table in which alcohol is being drunk. Means, if you're sitting in your table with you and your friends and there's nobody drinking alcohol, but over there in the corner someone else's, does that mean it's prohibited? Or does it mean that you're sitting on the same table somebody else is sitting on together, and then one guy is drinking alcohol and the other one isn't? So some of the scholars like Muna al-Qari, rahimahullah, comment in the hadith, he said he's not present in the place or the spot in which he's eating. And it says then it is obligatory on him to prevent anyone from sitting with him and drinking. And if he sits and does not deny that person, then that person is also liable. So for example, if you're sitting with someone, a friend who's a non-Muslim, for example, colleague from work, you're eating together, you can't sit with him if he's going to order a beer. You have to tell him as Muslim, I can't do that. It's important. Our deen in Islam is very important. And of course, if he's a respectable person, he will respect your wishes. Say, that's okay, I won't drink it in front of you. But it was not allowed to sit together and say that I'm not drinking and he is. وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Allah says, don't cooperate in sin and transgression, because sitting with him when he's drinking the intoxicant, even though you're not drinking, is tacit approval. It's very important. Sometimes this is where it all starts, because another person may walk by and say, oh, Fulan so-and-so is drinking khamar. They say, no, I'm just sitting with the guy who's drinking it. Or he may take the wrong impression that it's halal, because you sat there and you didn't. Why did you say anything about it? It's very important. So that obviously is haram, on the same table. The problem is, what if it's away from my table? So then we know the ulama, when they explain the issue, they do have some detail. So one, our situation is most restaurants, not all of them, have some capacity of alcohol. So with that being said, we should already be aware of that. But in a situation where the alcohol is present but not being served, like for example, it's behind the counter and no one is drinking at this hour, it is permissible, inshallah, to sit there if it's not being drunk, or if it's being hidden. Maybe they drink at the night, not the day. Ibn Qudam and Mughni, he writes, the person, for example, goes to a walima, and there's evil there, but he can't see it and he can't hear it. It's important. In this situation, Imam Ahmed held the view you can sit there, because you can't hear and you can't see. And some specific said khamra is there, but it's not being poured at the moment. Even though it's still not better to be there, but that's one situation. Another situation would be, it's present, and you yourself are in a place further away from it. And it was a restaurant, it's very big, let's say, and you're in one corner, and a far corner over there, someone's drinking. So it's not on your table, not on your side. And you need to sit in this area, i.e. you want to eat in this restaurant for a reason. The food is halal, for example, or you're there, for example, someone's traveling, or in a situation where they're hungry, and they need to eat. Because we're talking reality here, we're not talking about outside of reality. Here, some of the scholars understand that the lands of the non-Muslims, like we're in, is very different than Muslim lands. The Muslim lands is not something we can ignore. But the Muslim lands, we know, is something really big problem. And therefore, Shaykh Al-Albani, rahimahullah, one of his fatwa, Mutafarriqat, one of the audios that was recorded and transcribed, tape 168, they mentioned a specific situation. And they were talking about alcohol in coffee shops and the likes. And for those of us who are aware of our society, alcohol is even served in some places, especially in America. Even Starbucks offers alcohol. And so this is very important. This is a real situation. Some cities better than others. For example, our city, maybe we have more halal meat or halal restaurants. Other places, even the regular store has alcohol. Maybe like a regular everyday convenience store or whatever it is. So Shaykh Al-Albani, he writes, rahimahullah, said that in the situation where it's possible to retreat to a place in a coffee shop or restaurant such that he does not sit with those who are drinking directly. However, he says, with that I imagine that there is still places in the non-Muslim lands where the situation is a little bit lighter than this. There are restaurants where you don't have to do that. But he says, is the restaurant spacious such that there is space to retreat, like a far corner, from sharing with others? And the Shaykh says, if the restaurant's tight and crowded, then this is different. And if it's a big restaurant, you're one area far away from others, the Shaykh says it's possible. Because we're talking about the reality, which is, you're not literally on the same table, and the other response would be that all restaurants are haram or all coffee shops. So the Shaykh, they have understanding, they understand our situation, and they're giving us these details in the situation that we're going to eat. Because many Muslim restaurants, they also serve alcohol, and we have to be realistic. And the Shaykh mentioned the ayah, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, fear Allah as much as you can. So with that being said, we can say if the restaurant is very spacious, and it's possible to be far from those who are drinking, this is allowed, inshallah, with that. But if it's obviously better, other fatwas say, stay away from it. Another fatwa Shaykh said, you can take it to go. This is the best. Especially because you know yourself and your family, you come to eat. It's not conducive to sit there, even if it's further away, you don't feel comfortable. Lajnat Daima also, the permanent committee was asked about the same issue, and they said that if there's a necessity, they have to sit and eat there. For example, someone is on the travel and they can't find any other restaurant. For example, the airport, I believe there's lots of alcohol there. Or somebody is extremely hungry. And there's no, they say it's permissible then because necessity makes, and Allah yukallifu nafsan illa wus'aha. So with that we can see there are some conditions. So the summary of what we said was, if the alcohol is being drunk in there and there's no need for you to be there or sit there, take the food to go, provide the food is halal. But to sit there and make excuse while it's very close to you and you don't worry, this is the door to fitna. Because once you start there, next time maybe ikhtirat will be, people will sit in the same table as you, say it's okay. And it's slowly. So we say that if there's no need, better to avoid. But if so, if there's a necessity, it's permissible. If it's a spacious restaurant, there's an argument for that. And if someone doesn't have to be in that situation, get yourself out of it, it's best. Alhamdulillah, we have a lot, at least in this city, of alternatives. But in other places, the situation might not be the same. And also we said that if it's covered or hidden and not presently drunk, then there's also an argument for that. But of course, a person should also judge the situation and also keep in mind what's best and most pleasing to Allah. And that leads to another question, which is connected to this one, is that when you go to the restaurants like these, in which there is alcohol present, what about restaurants where they serve alcohol? In general, like a bar, but you're going there to eat in a bar. Because nowadays the bars, they have halal food, am I right? Yeah, right, they have halal food. Allah knows why, but they have halal food. So the question now is, can we eat in those places where they have the halal food in the bar? Shaykh Mu'taymin was asked this question, rahimahullah, where he says that there are some places literally called bars where the food and drink is offered there, khamar is there and other food. Can we eat in those places? In the Shaykh's fatwa, in all the, after he mentioned different components, right, whether it had been, number one, the food is halal or not, another issue, the alcohol, finally he says not allowed to do that. And as he said, كُنْتَ فِي ضَرُورَةٍ. If there's a necessity, then buy the food and get it and distance yourself in a place to eat or a place away from there. And this is a problem because some Muslims, right, they go to the bars in the hours where there's no haram happening. First of all, it's not good to be in the places of tuhma, places of accusation. A Muslim should always avoid any place where you be accused of doing something wrong. And this is an important principle. Some brothers, they don't care. They say, I don't care what other people think. The Sharia says care what other people think. So it's not allowed for you to, for example, to be standing in a very bad street in the city saying, I'm just standing here. You don't just stand there. No one just stands there. And even if you're standing there, halal, just stand there, some walk by and say, what are you doing there? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, hadith Safiya, radiallahu ta'ala anha, when he was talking with her at the door of the masjid. Imagine, he's mu'takif, he's doing i'tikaf, and she's at the door of the masjid, and it's nighttime and the Sahaba passed by. Why did Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam stop them to tell them it was Safiya? All the commenters of the hadith, Bukhari and Muslim, they said because he wanted to clarify to them and removing any doubt that come to their heart. Because shaitan wants to Ibn Adam, I measure them, we know, circulates in us like the circulation of our blood. So imagine now you go to the bar just to get some halal food and someone sees you, mashallah, your brother in the masjid, you're going to get yourself out of that one. And really, and many times we find people that license behavior based on what they see of the practicing. It's always important to take a look at yourself at that situation. I want to add something to this. When it comes to the marketplace, Imam Qurtubi, he mentioned that some of the mashayikh, they didn't like that other ulama or mashayikh go there because people will see them, Ahl Bir, being in there. It's very important. For example, one of the explanations of this part of the Tafsir al-Qurtubi, Shaykh Khudair was asked by one of the students walking there with the mashrah. He said, no, you don't do that. Yeah, that's not, many shaykhs walking with his bisht and mashrah in the suq. It's not, most time you won't find that situation. But imagine that you're walking, if you have a hajj, yes, but imagine you go into those places and some people will say, it's halal because I saw so-and-so who's more righteous than me doing that. So the better thing is that always you pay attention to your surrounding as well, because people, they do this, they take your example whether you know it or not. And the Muslim has to be worried about being accused of things which are wrong. So with that, we say that in summary, avoiding is best, but with those things that we mentioned of conditions, then sometimes they can be done. Another one connected to this, going to the restaurants in which there is music, or shopping centers or grocery store where the music is playing. And this is another situation that affects the Muslim, because everywhere we go, music is being played in this country or this city. So with this, the ulama, they mention the difference between listening to music and hearing. Difference between the two, listening and hearing. And what they meant by that is when you go to the grocery store even, to buy your stuff, there's a music playing. And you're just going to buy your groceries and leave. No one's going to say it's haram to go to the grocery store because of that. In the sense that it's not permissible for us to go and to listen to it, i.e. enjoying it. because you have a haja. The same if you were going to eat in a place and a Muslim restaurant is playing music. What we should do? Advise them to lower it. This is the best. Give them nasiha, we shouldn't play this, and just lower it. But in a situation you're going to eat and if there's some background music or something, the difference between listening and hearing is the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma fi Sunan Abi Dawud, Sahih. One day Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was walking with Ibn Umar and someone was playing a flute far away. So Ibn Umar, first he was walking with Nafi', his student, and when he heard the flute he plugged his ears. And he walked, and when he told Nafi' after a while, is there any more music being played? He said no. He said, this is what Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam did one day when I was with him. There's a flute being played, Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam plugged his ears. And he walked, and then Ibn Umar was walking with him. In the situation, Ibn Umar plugged his ear, but Nafi' didn't. Why? Difference between one listening and one who's hearing. Right? So closing the ear, this is the best. If you hear something, music or something bad, you don't want to listen. But how come Nafi' was listening? The ulama said because he's not listening, he's hearing. See the difference? He's just hearing. So if someone's walking by a place in the mall just to grab something and the music's playing, we don't mind it. Just do what you have to do, especially if you have to do that. You have to go in there and get it. But if you're there, just sitting there and enjoying it, then you're sinful. It's very important. This is the tafsir there. And of course, that doesn't now give us an excuse to go to the place where they're playing the loud music and just saying, I'm just hearing it. You're not going to hear yourself either, right, with that kind of music. And this is the problem. Sometimes we take a principle and you make it something wrong. You should not abuse these kind of principles. Rather, always remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another issue that comes up is very important when it comes to eating in these restaurants and the fiqh of that is to do with, we mentioned so this issue, is to do with the issue then eating in places and asking about the meat. So we said already when you go to the restaurants, the general rule if you go to a halal restaurant, or if someone takes the view of the people of the book, Ahl Kitab's meat is permissible in these lands, he goes to that restaurant, should they question the slaughter of the meat? So this is the issue that the Mashayikh they speak about. Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah read his fatwa, because he spoke about this in a number of places. One fatwa is asked by some of the brothers, they go to the restaurant and they ask about the chicken that's present, if it is slaughtered Islamically or not. Is this from wara'? Wara' is being cautious. And the Shaykh says, no, this is not from wara', because rather wara' is to follow the sunnah. And then the Shaykh mentioned that this kind of going there and asking is from tanattu', extremism, he said, an excessive, unnecessary burden. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, halaka mutanatti'un, destroy those who are extreme. In the sense that when we go to the restaurant and it says halal sign on it, and you go in there, you still ask the person, Muslim, is it halal meat? What exactly are you saying there? Now, if you said, I don't know this person. Yes, but he's giving you indication that it's halal. It's very different than if you went in there and it doesn't say halal, and you don't know who the guy is. And you ask, is it halal? He said, yes, that's different. But he has a certificate on the wall, and then you go and you ask, what expiry date of the certificate is it? Because now we're in this situation. People are asking for the certificate to be renewed. What is the permissibility of having a certificate in the first place? The permanent committee said it's permissible to have a certificate, especially non-Muslims, they get these certificates so me and you could eat. Because some Muslims, they don't know. But as Muslims, do we need a certificate to know it's halal? No, because we said in these lessons, we know halal from haram now. We don't need a certificate to tell us. So the person has or doesn't have as a Muslim, he says halal, Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah says the ask is extremism. Because what's his proof for this now? Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, when Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam brought the meat from people who just recently accepted Islam and the slaughtered meat was either before they accepted or after they accepted. He said, you say Bismillah, eat it. Another hadith, when they brought him the meat from the Jewish woman, brought him the poisoned meat, sheep meat, he ate it, alayhi salatu. He didn't ask, how was it slaughtered, where did it come from, what did you do with it? And Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam fears Allah more than any of us. So I think the principle here is kind of strong. Other scholars, they hold the view that for surety, you should, because you're in the places where you don't know. So for example, the permanent committee, one of the fatwas, they were asked, if you go to these restaurants, should I ask what the oil is? Should I ask what's on this, etc.? They said yes, because they're coming from the angle that you're in a place of a lot of doubt, so you must be certain. So combining the two, we can say that if someone has clear signs something is halal, then there's no need to be extreme in that. It's clearly saying halal, and Muslims, that guy's there. You're not going to go further than that. But if you're in a place and you're not sure, we could say that if you want to ask, it's your choice, inshallah. But you can't say now it's a must. At the same time, another person doesn't ask, we can't say is lacking iman and taqwa. Because it's a scholarly view. And so we see both. Added to this, the question one brother asked before about the ingredients on the back of products. Do I have to read it, or can I just pick it up knowing it's halal? For example, you go and you pick up some cereals from what we know is halal. So do I have to pick it up, read it first, or can I just pick it up and say it's cereal? What else could be in there? The permanent committee said, yes, you have to, or must you read in a situation in places like there's doubt. But we can also see the other angle that if it says on it, Shaykh Uthaymin and other fatwa said, if it writes on it halal, for example, or free, alcohol free, these are enough signs for us to take it. And also just general knowledge. So we have to understand that there's more than one view on the topic. And no one should accuse another person of lacking iman and taqwa. Right? Of course, checking always gives you surety, and tomorrow you won't get any surprises. Because we said nowadays, a lot of things in the market. Every day there's a new product and new something. But we shouldn't be extreme. It's very important. Because we know people now, they go to the Muslim restaurants and they go there and they make trouble for the restaurant. And many of you are familiar, probably. Many Muslims, they go to the halal restaurant and they go and they haggle the manager, is it hand slaughtered, machine slaughtered? And the owner has to kick them out because he's harassing them on this. Imagine, the Muslims are going harassing other Muslims on something which is halal. If you believe it's haram, you don't walk in the restaurant. This is what we should have. We have to have brotherhood in Islam. But if someone takes the view that it's better to ask, no problem. Another person says that generally Rasulullah didn't ask based on the apparent, and this is an opinion that exists. Another question that also comes up to do with the restaurants is to do with eating food from restaurants where the restaurant owners or the cooks are people who are not Ahl Kitab. So for example, you go to the restaurant and the people who are serving you are Hindus or Zoroastrians or like this. So Shaykh Uthaymin was asked this question, niqa'at. And he said that essentially if they're the people who actually slaughtered, in summary what he said, if they're the ones who slaughtered, then no, you can't eat their food. But if you go, for example, to a Hindu restaurant, let's say. So if they're going to serve something which needs to be slaughtered like meat, and they slaughtered it, then we can't eat it because they're not Ahl Kitab. They're not Jews and Christians. But if they're serving something which is not meat, for example, non-meat products, then it's halal to eat it. Added to this, what if they just cooked it and didn't slaughter it? Then it's still permissible because they're only the chefs and not the butchers. So you have to have detail there. And there's also similar fatwa from Shaykh Ibn Baz rahimahullah in terms of restaurants where Buddhists are working, and they're not the ones who slaughtered the meat, they're just preparing the meat. So we can't just say, oh, this person is a Hindu. We'll have to check where did the meat come from. And that's why it's not surprising to find that those restaurants have halal certification, but they're not Muslims. It's not surprising. So that's another issue that comes up. So you just double check. Also something connected to this is when you go to the restaurants and you want to eat inside the restaurant, oftentimes you have a choice of eating, right? When you see inside, they give you the plates and the cutlery of the non-Muslims they eat from. And for example, the customers who eat, they could eat something halal and there's something haram. Right? For example, the restaurant might sell pork, but you're ordering something which is not having pork in there. And the person maybe ate the pork in that one. And should I eat from the same plate? Even if they wash it, or should not? Because some people don't realize this. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Tha'lab al-Khushani, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he told the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam that lives in a land where lots of people of the book live. So he said, what should we eat from their vessels? And he said, don't eat from it, except if you don't find anything other than it. And if you don't find anything besides that, i.e. to use their dishes, فَاغْسُلُوهَا, wash it, أَكُلُوا مِنْهَا, then eat from it. Which means that the Rasul told us the rule that if there's the dishes of the non-Muslims, in origin is not impure. It doesn't mean in origin. It means that if they're eating impurities on top of it. And this applies also to many youth who live in the dorms. Many foreign students, when they live in the dorms and they eat in the mess hall, whatever they call the place where they eat together. The non-Muslims, they pick the plate, they eat something, somebody else washes the plate, comes again, you pick up something halal with it. So here the scholars say that the explanation, the hadith is that if they eat pork on it, which is najis, like we mentioned before, then they have to wash it before you eat it. If this plate's disposable, it saves you all problem. Just take that, you don't even have to worry. But obviously this is not the case if you're eating it. So as long as they washed it, no problem. Imam Khattabi rahimahullah said, the idea is that if they often eat pork on it, then you have to wash it. That's what the Rasul is telling us. Other than that, there's no harm. And same with the cutlery. Some people, they just take it to go and then eat inside. because they don't want to eat, they don't want to go near that. And that's another thing, it's up to your own preference. Because you understand then that it's not originally wrong, impure, just that if there is impurity there, just ensure it's washed. And for the most part it's washed, so inshallah there is no harm in that. And this is important to understand that there is such a fiqh there like that. Right? And obviously this is in a situation when you inside those kind of restaurants. Another thing also that is there, when it comes to the restaurant issues, is to do with when you're eating in the restaurants, and the restaurant produces or gives you the food and it's not good. Can you criticize the food that's there? Because now, we become Canadian and we're very used to that. We go to the restaurant, mashallah, we give the ratings, 5, 4, 3, whatever it is. So you go to the restaurant, you ate something, you give it bad, you say bad things about the food. Is this permissible in Islam or not? And this is a good question because as Muslims there is adab, even when it comes to the person who cooked. We know the hadith Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, hadith Abu Hurairah, في صحيح Bukhari, ما عاب رسول صلى الله عليه وسلم طعام قط. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam never criticized food at all. If he wanted to eat it, أكله وإلا تركه. If he wanted to eat it, he'll eat it. Otherwise, he'll leave it. This is makaram al-akhlaq. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is his akhlaq. And Akh Majidi was telling us about the manners and etiquette. This is from the best. This is etiquette of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even if you go to somebody's house or you eat someone, if you don't want it, don't eat it. And why did Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam never eat something he didn't like? Ibn Qayyim says and others, because Ibn Hubayra, Ibn Qayyim and others, they say because eating food you like is more healthy for you. And eating food you don't like is bad for your health. Right, some of you think, I wish I knew that when I was younger. But the point is, it's not good for you. If you eat something you don't like. Especially, even though it's healthy for you, it's better to, of course, if it's healthy you should eat it. But if you don't like it, and you don't have to eat it, it's not good, they say, for you. The idea here is Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, that was his etiquette. Now you go to the restaurant, the chef produced the food today bad. You're paying for it. Can I say something bad about the food? So here, some of the scholars they say, based on the sharh, it's not allowed. Why? Because ma'ab Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he never criticized it. Imam Nawawi says in commentary, what is criticizing? It's salty, it's burnt. This is what they mean. Not what some stuff we might say. This is what they mean. You're criticizing the food, the masnu', the actual ta'am, not allowed. So the first thing is that the hadith means criticizing the food. But Shaykh Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah says, what about criticizing the sana', the chef? Not the one the food. Or how about the sana', the way he did it? Shaykh Ibn Uthaymin says, then that's okay, he says. Shaykh says, Sharh Sahih Bukhari, Sharh Bulugh Maram, he says, if you're criticizing the chef and the way he did it, that's okay. Because it's going to help him for the future. For example, he said at home, someone's wife didn't cook something good, you can say today's food was a bit salty. So next time she doesn't make it that salty. Not the food, the way it's done. And that's actually, mashallah, a good opinion. That's a very good opinion because it's not applying the hadith directly. It's not contradicting with the hadith. But obviously, you should also be tactful and understand that if you're going to say something good, even hurt the feelings of the chef. You're supposed to give compliments to the chef, not the criticism. And that's why the ulama say, what's the wisdom behind this? It's very important. Wallahi, Islam, Deen al-Islam, it teaches all the best manners. What's the wisdom behind not doing this? Hafiz ibn Hajar says, Fath al-Bari, so you don't break the heart of the one who made it. SubhanAllah. Sometimes you think about Islam, where it teaches us and where we are. Even the person who cooked it, when he hears bad reviews, it affects them. But you obviously, you give advice, right? And you said something because he wants to improve. It's all the way you say it. And this, especially if you're criticizing the cooking and the chef, how they made it, not the food itself. Because food is ni'mah. That's the idea. Food is ni'mah. It's not to be criticized. This is Islam, what it teaches us. Added to this, the ulama also mentioned that even though the Rasul never used to do that, if he didn't like it, he didn't eat it. And that also shows you his high qualities. Hadith Khalid bin Walid radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when they were eating the dab, the sand lizard in front of him, alayhi salatu salam, he didn't want to eat it because it's not from his culture. He respected they were eating it. But he didn't eat it and he didn't make it prohibited. That's the etiquette as well. He didn't prohibit for them that which he didn't like because it's still halal. And this is the etiquette that he showed us. And that's why we should always remember, even if you're a paying customer, be respectful. Rahimullahu rajulan, may Allah have mercy upon a man, samhan idha ba'a wa ishtara. Right? The hadith tells us, may Allah have mercy upon a man who is lenient when he buys and sells. And even if you're going to complain that you want a refund, how are you going to do it? That's the thing, the difference between the person. Because if he burnt your food, you have a right. Because you're paying, and I believe Abu Fajr in his class in Biyu'ah, and we'll study this, you're paying for the food to be produced. So you pay it before and it comes in according to what you had ordered, in the way it's supposed to come. If it didn't come now, it's not the payment, I didn't pay for that. So that's why you can't get the money back, it's understandable. But how are you going to get it back is the question the Muslims should think. Nowadays, maybe we learn to bang the table and call the chef out of the kitchen and yell at him. But where is this from Islam? Even if you have a haqq, is this how you get it? And understand that you're going to get your haqq, but then people will see you around and say, this is how the Muslims are, right? When they don't get what they want. But when we don't give the haqq, when someone bangs the table on us, it's a little bit different. And we have to learn this etiquette now because as Muslims, we have to treat one another differently than we treat others. Even Muslims, we treat everyone nice, but Muslims more so. And one of the calamities maybe in the Muslim community we need to work on, we may treat the Muslims worse than non-Muslims. And that's one of the worst characteristics. But Muslims should have rahmah for the believer more so than the non-believer. Sahaba were merciful amongst each other. So if you go to a Muslim restaurant, it was late, have rahmah, be easy going. It's better for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, messenger, made dua for such a person. Amongst other things that also are there that is important to understand is that a Muslim, when they're going out to eat in these restaurants, they should also be mindful of israf. And we'll finish with this point, israf. Israf is very important that we don't do it. Extravagance. And there's tabdhir and there's israf. The ulama, some of them differentiate between israf and tabdhir. One is wastefulness, the other one is extravagance. So we know we're not supposed to be extravagant. So for example, if you go to eat, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us our principle, eat whatever you wish, wear whatever you wish. Right, this is important. And drink whatever you wish, as long as two things are not there. Israf and wala makhila. No arrogance and no extravagance. Hadith Ibn Abbas, hadith sahih. And what it tells us that these things are not allowed to be there. So even if you go to eat, you don't just order everything because you can pay for it. It's israf. And some people say, I can afford it. You got to eat it then. Because you're just going to throw it all out. And some people have that problem because they have, mashallah, the habit just to want to try everything. You have to eat it. Or you order a lot of things. And israf, they say, is when you go above the need when there's a need. Some of the ulama say israf means you go za'id, increase over the haja, when there's a haja. Or tabdir, there's no haja and you did ziyada. That's tabdir, you're just wasting. So for example, you go eat, the brothers say, it's 4 people, you order 7 things. You don't need all that. And why do you order? Because you can, and then it all goes in the garbage. Same in the walima and the wala'im, the wedding. And you don't have to slaughter the whole farm. And this is the problem. Sometimes with israf, it becomes more and more habitual. Generosity is one thing, but we have to be careful because it's going to waste. And that's why our last point we mentioned, even when there's too much, keep it and give it to the poor and needy. Or give it to the animals. This is a very good thing. You finish, can't finish, take it to go, give it to those who have. It's very important because the Muslims should always think, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked me, about this ni'mah. It shouldn't be mahaba order. I always leave behind things. I take it and I give to the poor and the needy, or I give it to the hayawanat at least. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be mindful. Inshallah, we end with this much in this series about food and drink. There's a lot of things that we covered, and obviously more things that could be covered, but I believe inshallah that for the most part the intent has been covered. And inshallah next week we'll begin a new subject matter, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Anyone has any questions or comments or anything, inshallah we'll take from it, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Yes. Wa alaikum salam. So that's a good question. You're going together with people. Some people want to stay in these kind of sittings, a place where it serves alcohol, for example, and there's a space, or like we mentioned some of the ulama, what they mentioned of conditions, and you wanted to go. You should talk about it beforehand and try to encourage them to do whatever is safer. Tell them, guys, in there, it's not a good look for us. We shouldn't go, and people might see us. Or we could take it, we'll go to the park, or we'll go to somebody's house. You make a solution. But at the end of the day, you have to judge the situation by situation. Because sometimes you might go and there's no, people, it's hard to change all their minds. And as long as you're not sitting, as you said before, right next to people who are doing that, or the place is spacious enough that you're not immediately in front of them, or there's a need. If these are not met, you tell their brothers and beforehand, we shouldn't do that. Because your job is also to teach them. Right? Especially if you know, they don't know. Right? So always the best thing when you're planning, put that input in there and don't be shy, because the people, they usually want good for each other, and inshallah you get hasanat for teaching them that about that which is better and that's safer. Allahu a'lam. Yes.
I have a question about cross-contamination. If impure, both the
So that's the thing. If it's cooked, the problem, we say that we're talking about cross-contamination when cooking. So now it's all there, obviously it's mixed together, so avoiding it. But you're right, if you have something in films and you wash it, it becomes pure now. But obviously that wouldn't, if it's cooked, you're going to wash the food and ruin it, right? So before, yes, you're right. So just like if the food, halal food fell into some najis on the floor, you pick it up, and the ulama said, proof, for example, you have a pot of fat. And this is a very good example. The scholars mentioned, and the hadith mentions, for example, a mouse falls in there. And a mouse, we know generally is khabith, it's filthy, and it's always on filthy things. And what do you do with the rest? So they say you take out the mouse and what it's around, the surrounding, and you keep the rest. So it shows you that it can be purified, and this is allowed, yeah. Allah, yes.
Is it extreme to ask, for a pizza shop, for example, use a different cutter to clean the cutter, because they don't generally clean it between uses, right? I mean, you can touch bark and then they just use it.
Yeah, so we spoke about that one last week, and we said that the ulama say you should do. Tell them either or ensure that they're doing that. For example, you ask for a clean cut, we said, or you tell the person when you're ordering, please, can you wash the cutter before? And yes, you're right, and it's better. Right? And they say it's not extreme, because this one we know that they're cutting with the same thing, even though the policy shows that they shouldn't be doing that. Right? But you're right, if they don't practice, your job is to tell them, and after that, you don't have to worry. Right? Because you did your job. You don't have to investigate after what's on and what's not. Because at the end of the day, their job is to do beforehand. And we spoke about that last week, yeah, inshallah. Any other questions? طيب إن شاء الله. We end with this much. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.